So this meeting was posted because we could have a quorum of one committee or another. We don't know which. So just to be safe, we are recording this and it was a posted meeting. I think, well, it's 7. We'll give 2 more minutes and then we'll begin. In the meantime, Sheila, why don't you talk a little bit about the forum?
Okay, I'd be happy to. So I'm Sheila Lyons, and I am a resident of Wellfleet and president of or chair of the Wellfleet Community Forum. And I like to point out that the Wellfleet Community Forum was put together in the 90s when, this town had big disagreements against each other, and there was a lot of opinion, and nobody felt like they were being heard. So the forum was created to create a safe space so that we could voice our questions, our concerns, and not feel you're going to be attacked by your neighbor. So I guess that happened back then. Hopefully that's not who we are today. But it is a great a forum to be able to bring together all of us to address certain issues that are facing our community and in our surrounding communities, our region as a whole. So we've hosted people from the commission, we've hosted town meetings, not hosted town meetings, but a pre-town meeting, which will be coming up, and the state of the town. And Charlie is good enough to give us the state of the town. And I think that we all want to sort of hear it. Charlie and I went over this yesterday, and I just said, give a sort of a brief overview of what you walked into, what's been done, and tell us what we need, where you see our future going. And I also asked him, to be frank, because I do think that we as citizens need to help our Board of Selectmen and our town, as opposed to just telling them where they're going wrong. And, we all get that. We all get a lot of that. So we need to be more constructive. So I'm hoping this is going to be a great discussion and informative to all of us as we're heading into decisions we have to make at town meeting and our elections. So I want to thank all of you for being here, and I'm going to give it back to Dick. And when we feel we're ready, we can start this. Looks like a lot of people are still logging on. So Dick, I'll let you make the call, and I'll get Charlie on there.
I think because we are over 85 people, we should use the chat.
Okay.
So
on that, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. And I have access to that chat, Dick.
yes.
I'll be happy to help monitor and read those out as once Charlie is sort of finished and he's ready for questions.
Right. And you
That
should
can be at any time, Charlie.
So address the chat to everyone in the meeting.
Yes. We won't go by the hand signal. We'll put that in there, and we will try to get to everyone's chat. And since it's being recorded, we will have these questions. And I'd like to say that Charlie's going to answer those individually, which I won't put him on because he's got enough to do. But we will have those questions for reference. And if we can maybe address them in a future forum, we will go back to this and kind of sum up what came out of it.
One final item. We have nearly 100 people here. If you would like to be on our mailing list, please go to wellfleetcommunityforum.org and say, add me to your mailing list, and you will be notified of future meetings. We welcome everybody. There's no membership fee to join, and it's we have a lot of what I hope are interesting meetings.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And Charlie, I see you're unmuted. Would you like to go from here? Charles Sumner is our acting town administrator. He valiantly stepped forward after 35 years as town administrator in Brewster, a short stint as acting town administrator in Provincetown, and right into the jaws of I don't know what. He's a brave man.
He's a very brave man, and he's a very capable person. So I was always happy that Charlie came on to help us.
Okay, well, thank you, Dick, and thank you, Sheila. Yeah, I've been a town administrator in several towns for a long time, mostly in Brewster. And I did retire back in 2015, and I worked for not-for-profit for 3 years. But I am the moderator in Brewster, so I stay involved in local issues. And really, my whole life has been local government, and it's important to me. And when I was contacted, I had just finished up work in Provincetown, and frankly, I was looking forward to taking some time off. But when Wellfleet called, I mean, it just seems to me that people deserve good government, and you were in a crisis, and I was proud to be appointed as your town administrator and try to help out. I will say this has taken longer than I would have thought, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit because you deserve to know. But I signed on to address these problems and issues, and I intend, as long as you want me, to finish the job before I leave. Now, so anyway, let's go back a couple of steps here. Back in on July 1st, 2019, the town transitioned from one software platform to another, from BSMI to Vadar. And really, it appears to me it's pretty clear that the train came off the track very quickly and at that moment. And so that when you closed out fiscal year 2019 and started the new fiscal year 20, you never established closing and beginning balances for those fiscal years. You never created a chart of accounts for budgeting purposes. So there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. And part of it is that transition from one vendor to another. A lot of it, in my mind, has to do with a tremendous amount of turnover. You've had several town accountants, town administrators during this period, and you had a lot of new people in positions that didn't have a lot of experience and needed a lot of support. So, to me, the reality is there was a problem. It magnified itself because it wasn't addressed in a timely way. And so, you have me. So anyway, I would tell you that what I initially did was Lisa Sauvé was the finance director for the town of Brewster for 27 of my 30 years in Brewster. So Lisa and I know each other really well. And Lisa's, like me, is retired. I brought Lisa on board. She had been working here part-time for a while. She had left. But when Wellfleet called, I called Lisa and said, "Oh, Lisa, I need you. I can't fix this without you." And she did agree to come back, and I'm just really grateful for that. Also, the problem was.
So we have broccoli left over. There were a lot of people there.
Okay, anyway, I'll keep going.
Okay,
So, I hear some other voices. I'll wait a minute.
Unmute yourself again, Charlie. I'm going to mute everyone. So Charlie, can you unmute yourself?
I think can you hear me, Dick?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so anyway, the first step was hiring Lisa Sauvé as the interim town accountant. And then on top of that, the workload was great. I hired a woman by the name of Mary McIsaac. Mary McIsaac served as the finance director for Barnstable County, the comptroller for the town of Barnstable, many other municipal finance positions over the years. Most importantly, she was an auditor when she first got out of school for the Department of Revenue for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So, I really had that team in place, and, I really felt confident that, we had a lot of work to do, but, I'm sort of like driving the car, but they're doing all the work. Now, initially, I was of the opinion that the work that we would have to do, we would get done by the holidays, by Christmas. That was sort of the game plan that we had in mind. But things got complicated. We had an authorized leave by an employee in the accountant's office at the beginning of October, and that person was out. That person was out for 4 months. So now Lisa Sauvé had to do the assistant town accountant's job, the town accountant's job, and still try to catch up on correcting the records from the last 2 fiscal years. But we, still moving forward, making progress. And then our town treasurer, Miriam Spencer, resigned on November 30th. So that was, another curveball. And so now Mary McIsaac had to transition and serve as the interim town treasurer. And still at the same time, these 2 women are persevering, trying to clear up a lot of the problems and issues that we've had. So the reason I'm still here is that, that we haven't finished the job in the time frame that we wanted for those reasons that I just mentioned. Now, what are we really trying to do here? Now, the town has not closed the books for fiscal year 20 or fiscal year 21. So those books are still open, and that's what Mary and Lisa are spending their spare time on. And there was an audit that was done for fiscal year 20 by our auditors Powers and Sullivan that listed a broad series of concerns in the management letter, issues that had to be addressed. And it also talked about a variance of $760,000 approximately. So, our goal was to really go back through fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 21 and touch every one of these transactions. Now, fiscal year 20 is much more grinding and demanding than fiscal year 21 because Lisa Sauvé was here part of fiscal year 21. So that's a sort of an improved situation, but 20 is really problematic. So we've been going back and reviewing every single transaction and making, doing reconciliation work, identifying problems, errors, omissions, and correcting them. And in fiscal year 20, we've made over 1,000 journal entries, corrective journal entries to the town's financial records as we identify problems. So, it's grinding work, but we just felt like that this, it demanded scrutiny and accuracy, and this level of effort and work was important. Now, FY21 is not as complicated as FY20, but we got to fix 20 so we can establish beginning balances. And then all of the work we will have done will allow us then to rapidly move through 21 and then have appropriate beginning balances for FY22. So that work's delayed, but our goal is to now finish that by the middle of March. Will it be perfect? Will we find every variance that the auditors mentioned? No, it's unlikely, but we're making good progress, and I think we'll come a long way. I think the most important thing that, there was a concern when I got here was there some type of a criminal or malfeasance that occurred? And I would say all the work that we've done by Mary and Lisa suggests no, that there's not anything criminal. There's certainly issues with, frankly, competency issues, lack of training, a lot of turnover, and a lack, of continuity of leadership. Those things have all played a part in the problems that you're experiencing as a community. But as I said, we haven't found anything to date that would suggest something that would suggest any criminal activity on the part of any town officials. Now, we have for FY22, the current fiscal year, we did establish a new chart of accounts for department heads, and we have been maintaining financial records on a monthly basis for department heads to show, original appropriations and expenditures and so forth. So the current fiscal year, is in good shape. Those are all of the things that Mary and Lisa have done during this period. So I think I'm going to stop. Oh, so anyway, I think the only thing I would say to you is, so our goal is by the middle of March, we'll close out those 2 fiscal years, and that will allow us to work with the Department of Revenue to certify free cash. So those are those critical steps that we want to do. Close out 20, close out 21, get free cash certified. Now, at the same time, the auditors are waiting to come in and do the audit for FY21, but they can't do that until we finish this work. So I suspect the auditors will be here sometime in late March or early April. And then we can do the audit for FY21. So, I think that I would say to you is one of the other major projects that I've been working on is we have to replace staff, right? We need a new town accountant. We need a new town treasurer, and we need a town administrator. However, we have delayed those hiring processes because, who wants to step in to have to deal with all of these issues? It's going to encumber our ability to attract new people to step in. So we only recently advertised for all of these positions because we wanted to be able to say in good faith that when these folks take over for us, that they can look forward. They can deal with the issues of today and forward, not having to deal with all of these matters in the that have existed over the last few fiscal years. But anyway, last night I did present a candidate to the Finance Committee for Town Treasurer. So Cameron Scott will start work as our Town Treasurer on I think March 7th or 8th, I can't quite remember, of 2022. So we're excited about that. And, Cameron's a really bright young gentleman. He is going to need some training and skill development. So we don't want to just put Cameron in the seat and walk out the door. We want him to succeed. We want the investment that you've made in Mary and Lisa and myself to pay off. So Mary McIsaac in this case will stay on as a resource part-time and help Cameron transition and as a new town treasurer. Additionally, I've reached out to the town of Brewster just because I know a lot of people in Brewster, and Brewster has the same software platform. We have Vadar. So I've reached out to the town of Brewster. Lisa Vitale has been the town treasurer in Brewster for about 25 years. I hired her. She's really good. She knows Vadar. Lisa will also serve as a mentor to Cameron, Mr. Scott, as he transitions. So that's the idea. Bring on people, make sure we support and train them going forward so that we don't regress again. And I currently, just to fill out this important hiring issues, I've also advertised for the town accountant's position. And by the way, municipal finance people are really in demand. I'm 67. All these baby boomers, we're all retiring rapidly from the workforce, and these are kind of specialized, these finance positions with Massachusetts finance are pretty highly specialized. There's not a lot of depth out there. So anyway, I've advertised for the town accountant's position. I've already been involved in interviews. I hope in the next couple of weeks to be able to make a recommendation to the select board about a permanent town accountant. And same thing is Lisa Sauvé who's a certified Massachusetts municipal town accountant with 35 years of service in local government, will be a backstop. And then also the town of Brewster, through their finance director, will also provide mentoring and support services to our new town accountant. So that's the goal. Now, finally, me, I want to re-retire, to be honest with you. So we need to hire a permanent town administrator for your community. The select board have formed a committee. We have received resumes. I can't talk about the details because they're privileged in executive session, but we have I think our third meeting of the town administrative search committee tomorrow morning, I believe. And we're going to be starting interviews for these candidates probably in the next couple of weeks. So these critical things are now moving forward. So, the idea is we'll deal with the past, we'll clean that all up for you. And then these folks can focus on the future and feel comfortable that they're well supported to help you succeed. So I think Dick and Sheila, I want to talk about the budget for FY23, but should I maybe wait to see if there's any questions about this particular aspect of what I'm doing?
Oh, that's fine. Why don't people raise their hand with the participants button? And I'll ask you to unmute yourself, which I think you can.
Well, I think Sheila's waving her hand. I see her
Yeah,
there.
She has to unmute herself. Sheila, you need to unmute yourself. Sheila, you need to unmute yourself.
okay.
You might have to unmute her.
Okay, I just finally did. Thank you. I just wanted to say that the chat is disabled. So if people were wanting to put questions in the chat, as opposed to we having to go through 100 hands and go through the screen and make sure we see everyone, that would be a good thing. If we could disable the chat and or enable
your
the
hand.
chat. It's been disabled.
Sheila, if you raise your hand, my participants view shows at the top the people who have the hand raised.
Okay.
In the order in which they raise it, so I can call them.
Okay, that's fine.
So please use the reaction and raise your hand and I will call on you.
And of course, I had, so I'm gonna make the first question and people can go from here. So Charlie, you've been very hard at work trying to fix the internal workings. And what has been happening? Are we able to actually function as a town, and what has happened that's been passed outside of the financial and the administrative and all of those things that you are totally focused on? Are we making progress in different areas? I mean, we have wastewater things to go forward. We have housing projects. I see there, I'm here, right? The sewer line or the pipeline for the redundancy to our wells is coming up my street. Tell me how the town is functioning in the interim while or in tandem with these troubles.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Sheila. Yeah, so listen, communities are really dynamic and yours is in particular. I mean, there's a lot going, it's funny, I'm a Brewster guy, right? My whole world's Brewster. But people will say, hey, how's Wellfleet going? And the answer is there's so much happening here. It's really, and there's a lot of good stuff. sometimes I think that, these elements, these problems that you experience overshadow all of the wonderful things that are going on. And so let me just talk about a couple of those to respond to Sheila's question. So like the harbor dredging project is this phase 2 is complete. That was a $5 million project, and half of that was paid for by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So, between the Marina Advisory Committee and the Dredging Committee and other town officials, they've positioned the town well. That project is finished, and was finished on time, just on time, but still on time. The Herring River Restoration Project, oh my heavens. I mean, I'm just like astounded by that project. It's a 1,000-acre salt marsh restoration project. And there's a team of people with the Friends of Herring River and our state and federal and local partners who have been working on this together. Roughly that's a $75 million project. It's largely 3 phases. Phase 1 is $50 million. And the town of Wellfleet is well positioned because of all the work that you've done over the past several years to benefit from this federal infrastructure money that's is becoming available. And this project, is really shovel ready. So, that's an incredible project. And as I say, I think it's just a matter of time, but I think we're going to hear good things about funding on Herring River restoration. So, I mean, that's an incredible project that you've all accomplished as a community. And then also, I would say there's also a lot more federal infrastructure money becoming available for salt, for shellfish restoration issues, drainage improvements, water quality improvements. And the same thing, we've met with federal and state officials recently to go over the status of a number of other projects in Wellfleet. And I think that over the next 3 to 4 years, a lot of these projects will be funded with significant money from federal and state resources. And it's because a lot of your boards, committees, and departments heads have been preparing and ready to deal with some of these issues. So you're well positioned to benefit from a lot of this federal money that's going to be flowing into these communities. Same thing on wastewater, that you still have some work to do, but you're well along the way in terms of dealing with wastewater issues in that plan. So there's a lot of money out there, and the reality is if we can use federal, state, regional resources to pay for this, it's going to decrease the demand on local taxpayer money. So, and then of course, housing, really, you folks have a really active affordable housing program in town with some really wonderfully dedicated people. And the 95 Lawrence Road project is, we went through a process to select a contractor, a vendor for that project. That's been done. We'll be working on the permitting phase soon. So that's well on its way. And of course, the water main expansion has started. I think, did Sheila mention that it's in front of
Yes,
her?
they did.
Yeah. So anyway, I haven't left my office, by the way, so I never get, people ask me, well, I haven't even been out of my office, but anyway, I got to get out. But anyway, that project is going on, and that's really a good thing for the water systems expansion and the capacity within that system. So there's many more infrastructures going on, projects going on. The other thing I would like to say, since I'm talking about these things, is I didn't really work on any of these projects, but you have a lot of really committed volunteers and department heads that are working effectively, collaboratively on these matters. And if anything, I would say that in spite of all the challenges and the problems that Wellfleet has experienced in the last 2.5 years, it's because you have rock solid department heads that the machinery has has continued to function reasonably effectively. You know, they've been maintaining their own books and ledgers. And they've been moving the ball forward in so many fronts. And the other thing I've noticed with your department heads, and I had this in Brewster, is they play well together. They work well together. They collaborate. They help each other. I've noticed that we have these emergency planning meetings during storm events, and I just can see that that camaraderie that exists between these people. So, you know, it's easy to get tied up in the bad stuff, but there's a lot of good stuff going on in this town. So,
Can I ask another question since I don't see anything in the chat yet?
Well, raise your hand.
So-
Raise your hand if you want to ask. a
I'll
question.
raise a hand. So Dick, can you see if there's hands out there? I
There
don't
aren't
want
any
to
yet.
jump in on anyone.
Nope, there aren't. Go ahead.
Okay, so you know, and I agree with you, Charlie. I do think that in spite of ourselves, we're getting things done. And there are people who are committed and see that there are things that need to be done, and let's get that progress growing. But we do need a functioning town. So maybe people, this is a good opportunity to explain the free cash, you know, these in their bureaucratic holdups because of free cash. I mean, people don't understand what it is that's going to keep us from going forward, how we have to reconcile this, and how are we going to fix that gap? Other than if it's going to be a 2.5 override, you can say that out loud. But it's you know, let's be, you know, let's put it out there and be honest. And we're all here. We all know that there's pain, and you know that we also, I think, as a community, have been writing a lot on. You know, we're out here. We don't have a lot of we have not had a lot of infrastructure needs. We've had a lot of second homeowners and that tax base. So it was easy to take this ride for a while, but now we have a lot of people we have more people living here than we did over COVID. We have infrastructure needs that we try to, you know, not to see. And this is not indicative of Wellfleet. This is across the Cape. No one wanted to you know, acknowledge the costs. And so now that we're acknowledging that, what is it that we have to support whoever is in that board of selectmen? Because the board of selectmen in this town and the administration do work together as much as we've tried to give it more autonomy to one or the other. You know, they administrate, but they also get into things. So what do we need to know about free cash? How can we help our board? And how can we be effective in making arguments to our town?
Yeah, well, maybe, okay, let me,
Yeah,
I'm almost gonna jump, if it's okay, if there's no hands raised. I'm gonna touch on that when I talk about fiscal 2023, maybe. All right.
Okay.
So, okay, so, you know, now relative to free cash, the last time you certified free cash was in fiscal 2020. So it's been a long time. And you know, typically the best municipal practices is you certify free cash every year. As soon as you close your books on June 30th, you're working towards getting ready to certify free cash, usually in the fall. So you haven't done it for a long time, and the answer is, I would like to certify free cash now, because I do think you're going to have some reasonable free cash certification monies available. But because of the uncertainty with fiscal 2020, all of the problems that we've identified, and in the audit that was done that showed this variance of $760,000, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we do give them an update every couple of months, the Department of Revenue. The Department of Revenue has said, listen, we're not going to certify free cash for the town of Wellfleet until you close the books for 2020 and 2021, and you have the audit completed for 2021. So, I hope to get certified free cash soon, but it's going to be probably not till June, May, June before I can get that done. And, I'm not critical of the Department of Revenue's position on this. I think it's in Wellfleet's best interest to make sure that we get these critical work elements done so that when we do certify free cash, it's a solid number that you can have confidence in. So that's the reality of that. The first thing that I would recommend that the community do with free cash is replace all the money that we took out of stabilization fund on June 26, 2021. I think I saw Harry's on this call, Harry Tarkanian. Harry and I are colleagues and friends. We've known each other for a long time. And, we talk enough. He's helped a lot. But you think about it, last year, the town didn't have a budget and didn't have a warrant. As you got into the early spring, you had to delay your town meeting till the end of June. Harry and a few other people, Chief Polly and others, stepped in and put a warrant and a budget together in under really a lot of duress in terms of time issues. So there really wasn't sort of what I'll talk about in a moment is a complete financial forecast that was done. In the end, we had to use $639,000 out of the stabilization fund to backstop the budget for FY22. It's not recommended. We didn't want to do it, but at that 12th hour, we had no choice. So the first thing that I had recommended to the select board and the finance committee when we get free cash certified is to replace the money that we took out of stabilization fund and put it back into the stabilization fund. The reality is if we don't, your bond rating is at risk. You do have a AAA bond rating, and I think it's in jeopardy, right? So we want to do everything we can do when we get re-rated to demonstrate that we've identified the problems, we've addressed them, we've remedied them, and we've reestablished good financial practices going forward. So anyway, that's my goal for you on free cash.
Ed, you have a question, Ed Miller?
Yes, thank you, Dick. Actually, a question and also a small correction. I want to correct something that Charlie said a minute ago that was not right. I'm sure inadvertently. Charlie, you said that the last time free cash was certified was fiscal 2020. Now, we just heard yesterday at the Independent from the Department of Revenue, and they told us that the last time Wellfleet's free cash was certified was as of June 30th, 2019. And of course, that's the end of fiscal 2019, not 2020.
That's true, but it wasn't done until June of 20.
It was done in 20, but it was certified as of fiscal 2019.
No, I know. I didn't say that. I said it was certified in June of 20. So you don't have to correct me because I was correct. Thank you.
So my question for you is that the upcoming audit of the town is going to be done by Powers and Sullivan. And you recently told the select board that you don't have any confidence in Powers and Sullivan based for obvious reasons, you said.
I did not say that. Once again, I will tell you, I did not say that.
Well, the reporter who observed you say that is with us tonight. Perhaps she can clarify.
What I would correct you on, Mr. Miller, is I would tell you what I said was that the Department of Revenue does not have confidence in the audit for FY20. And for that reason, they want the audit done for FY21 before they're willing to certify free cash. So, you know, I don't want to really get involved in an interview with you now. However, that's what I said.
I'll leave it there. Thank you, Charlie.
You're quite welcome.
Ryan Curley?
Yes, so I was the one that said I don't really have much confidence in the auditor currently. And during that, Charlie said he understood that position. I don't think he's ever spoken to his confidence personally in the auditors. So just for clarification. So thank you.
Thank you, Ryan.
Are there more questions? If not, Charlie, you were going to proceed on with two other topics?
Yeah, so thank you. So I think I'd like to, if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk about fiscal 2023, the new fiscal year that we're working on. So so where we're at on that is I have worked with the department heads to prepare a operating budget for the new fiscal year starting July 1st, 2022. And what I tried to do when I put that budget together is to say, what would it cost Wellfleet taxpayers to maintain municipal services at the same level as you enjoy in fiscal year 2022. So that's what I've done. I've put a budget together that reflects that. And then I've sort of identified there are some departments that have some requests beyond that. And so what I've recommended to the select board is that we talk about those separately. Now, in addition, so I put the budget together and I developed a draft warrant for the 2022 annual town meeting that right now is scheduled for April 25th, 2022. I've given the finance committee a warrant. Currently, there's 60 articles in the warrant. And the idea is that the policymakers, our elected officials, get a budget and a warrant so they can go through a deliberative process all winter long and engage the community in that conversation. So those critical steps have been done and done in a relatively timely way. Next issue that I've been working on is I wanted to develop a financial forecast, a 5-year forecast, just to say, with this budget, with certain assumptions, what is the affordability of it relative to the property tax levy and the town's ability to finance. So that's a nice tool that I'll put in place. And I think you can use that going forward. And once again, when you hire a new town administrator, you know, I would be there just to work with that person to review kind of what we've done and why we've done it. But this is a good tool for the town to make decisions about what the cost of providing municipal services are in a static way. And then also if you want to require, if there's a request for additional services, how much would that cost a taxpayer? So my financial forecast is a multi-page document. It really analyzes revenues at a pretty detailed level. And then the same thing, it takes a look at expenditures and looks at all of the spending articles that are in the warrant, all of the budget appropriations that are currently before the select board and the finance committee. And when I look at that today, and the select board and the finance committee haven't had a chance to affect change here, but currently I show an operating deficit of about $1,946,000, i.e. we have spending that's greater than our ability to finance. Now, what does that consist of? And I break that out further. And I try to go over this almost every week with the select board. And I will be reviewing it again next week along. I'll be reviewing it with the finance committee as well. But when I really take a look at that $1,946,000, what is it? Well, $586,000 is the operating budget, i.e. the budget that I drafted to maintain the same level of service is out of balance by $586,000. So the only way you cure that, I call it an operating budget deficit, is you ask for an override, or you cut spending, or a combination of both. And I suspect that right now, you know, that's an early deficit, and I probably would think that there's going to be some changes that might improve that condition before we finish this project, but that's the operating budget deficit today. Now, on top of that, you've had a practice in this community of just about every capital special project item that's on the warrant is funded via a Proposition 2.5 override. I think last year we had 12 or 13 items on the warrant for trucks and, you know, facility repairs and special projects. Now, so when you look at the warrant that I've drafted, we have $1,360,000 worth of spending requests, trucks, cruises, engineering, all kinds of special projects. You have all of those items on the warrant, and you have no money to pay for those. So the only way you can pay for those is either get an override, or identify new revenues, or cut spending. And I think that's the plan that I've started to talk to the select board about is, you know, right now, that $1,360,000 is everyone's requests. And I think we should be working over the next few couple of months to pare that down to some reasonable number. And then make a decision of whether we want to ask the voters for a Proposition 2.5 override. I would say that, you know, when I really look at your total financial plan, you know, the foundation is not stable. You know, you've been using a lot of one-time revenues to finance the operating budget. You used ambulance funds one time. We used stabilization funds last year. You've used all your accumulated reserves in the beach fund. So, you know, I'm never really one for using one-time revenues for annual operating costs, but you've done that over the last few years. So the foundation of the town's fiscal plan is not stable right now. And what I would like you to consider, the community to consider as we go down this path is, let's repair the foundation of the town's operational budget. And I do believe you need an override. The amount we can all debate about all winter long. On top of that, you know, you have a lot of municipal buildings, a lot of municipal infrastructure, a lot of municipal equipment. You have no money reserved to pay for those things. So if you need cruisers, you have to get an override. If you need to replace a fire truck, you need an override. If the dump truck can't be repaired any longer, you need new dump truck, you need an override. So this is, you know, I consider it, and I would say most communities would consider that not the best basis of operation. So I do think what I'm going to recommend to you all as a community is we get a general override for the operating budget, and then we get some type of a special purpose override. That could be $750,000 or $900,000 or whatever. Some number that sort of creates revenues that will be reserved and by policy for equipment replacement going forward. And then I think, you know, you're back on track. You've got an operation that can be supported by a revenue plan. Now, does this mean you're never going to need another override? No, it doesn't. But I would say that, you know, when I was running the town of Brewster, if someone needed a new school building, a new fire station, something of that nature, you got an override, you got a debt exclusion to pay for it. It's the only way to do it. And then, but still, our costs, our revenues go up by 2.5 or 3%, and municipal costs can go up by 3.5 to 4%. Health insurance, pension, wage adjustments, all the factors that it takes to build a municipal budget. And so every several years, I do think if you plan properly, then you need a modest override to maintain operations. So you don't have these big fluctuations in the impact upon you as homeowners. Now, I'm just going to give you a couple of more pieces. So anyway, I think we need a general override, operating override, and I think we need some money for capital and equipment replacement. We also have a few other items that are going to be presented to the voters. The police department is looking for 2 new police officers. So we have an override that we're talking about now in the amount of $187,000. And that includes wages and benefits for 2 new employees for the police department. Chief Hurley will be talking about this in more detail, but I will tell you that police reform has changed many issues about policing in Massachusetts. And you've relied, and we did in Provincetown when I was working there as well, on a lot of seasonal officers. That those are not going to be allowed any longer because of the training requirements that are in place for municipal police officials. So you do have a problem in the police department. And I think that you're going to have to think about increased staffing there. Additionally, Chief Pauly has a multi-year plan. You know, when I first arrived in Brewster back in 1986, we had 50 call firefighters and 2 full-time firefighters. And that was the norm. That was commonplace. It worked. It was very cost effective. Same thing in Wellfleet. You had a lot of call firefighters back in the day. And for a whole bunch of reasons that Chief Pauly will articulate, it's not the case any longer. So you've been transitioning over several years to a full-time fire department. I think you have 3 or 4 call people left that are still functioning. So anyway, Chief Pauly has a multi-year plan, and that includes 2 additional firefighter paramedics for this year in the range of $207,000. 2 more items I'd like to talk about before I open it up for questions is we also, if you look at the draft warrant, we have a debt exclusion for a fire engine. It's a 25-year-old fire engine. That is in the amount of $745,000. That would be a debt exclusion. Now, I have been in conversations with Chief Pauly as we've been, you know, dealing with issues day by day. One of the things that we used to do in Brewster is we reserved all of the ambulance receipts revenues for capital equipment replacement for the fire department. It worked well in Brewster, and Chief Pauly and I have been talking about creating a plan like that here in Wellfleet. I think you might have had that in the past. Anyway, if we're successful, there might be a way that we could eliminate this particular request for an override and use ambulance revenues over a multi-year period to pay for this. So we're talking about that. And then, of course, the last item right now, it's a big ticket item on the warrant, is we need to install a fire suppression system at the Wellfleet Elementary School. And Chief Polly will be talking about that in more detailed as we deliberate all these matters. That's $2,200,000. That would be a debt exclusion. And it's really a problem that needs to be addressed. So I'm going to stop there because it's probably way too much and see if there's any questions.
Deb Marger, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the comprehensive presentation and also the careful and respectful way you've discussed sort of the history of the problem and looking forward. As I hear you, especially around the need for a change in financial policy, not using non-recurring revenues for recurring operating expenses and so forth, I have a twofold question. And the first part, and bear with me, the first one is, does there need to be any structural or policy changes as how the board, staff, and finance committee work with each other?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. And Ryan Curley in particular has been quarterbacking a project, and he's been working with Fred McGee, chair of the finance committee. And that is, we'd like to formalize a number of these financial management policies and put those in place. So, most towns do it. We're working on it. And I think once we can get that resolved, I think that'll be the sort of the program going forward. And as long as you stick to the policies that you put in place, you can manage these things with relative ease. I always say, when people say, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I was a town administrator." And they're like, "Oh my God, that must be complicated." I'm like, "Well, no, it's actually not rocket science. It is straightforward and relatively simple. But it's just a matter of discipline and continuity and processes. And I think that's sort of what you're asking me. And I will say too, is I've been working with Fred McGee, who's chair of your finance committee. We've had really wonderful conversations. The finance committee, I've been working with a subcommittee of the finance committee to review all the work that Lisa and Mary are doing. So I think that, the future's bright, people are engaged, and we'll need to finalize these things before I leave, but we're well on the way to doing that. And also, I should have mentioned too, the Department of Revenue came in and did an interview with all municipal, officials involved in these matters, and they are in the process of finalizing a report with a series of recommendations. So I should have had that already. It's also been delayed, but I should have it soon. So you're going to have a lot of, advice in how to establish guidelines to avoid this going forward.
And the second part and last part of my question is, I'm a full-time resident of Wellfleet. What would you, in your dreams, want especially your full-time residents to do differently in the future to help assist in solving some of these issues?
Well, I think that, it's pretty simple, right? I mean, you've gone down a path that has been really disruptive to your community. You need to ask questions. The financial forecast that I've put together, everybody does this. You need to see it. You need to ask for it. And my financial projection is backstopped, like I do a 10-year analysis of local receipts. And I do a multi-year analysis of state aid. So these are all, elements that feed up to the financial forecast. you need to see all this, and it should be presented in a public forum. And as I say, it's commonplace. Everybody does it. So
Thank you.
Okay, David Rick, no. who's up
David
next?
Ricketts, yes,
David, yes,
yes.
you're next.
Hi. When you began the description of Mr. Sumner, when you began the description of the budget deficits in your forecasting, you started out with mentioning a little more than $500,000 that you described as operating expenses.
Yeah.
And what is that attributed to? Is that salaries and benefits of staffs, or is it possible to break that out, what that amount is?
yeah, well, it's really, there's two parts to it. I mean, costs have increased this year because of wage adjustments and other escalating costs, health insurance, pension costs, liability insurance, fuel. So a lot of it is just that. And then a part of it also is, remember, last year we were using one-time revenues to prop up the operating budget. So it's a combination of both.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
GB or Suze?
This is GB. One of the issues that I sense that we've been running into, just from reading various reports, is that when we go to hire people, they take the job and then they find out that finding a place to live is a near financial impossibility. Are we being upfront with people that we're interviewing about this situation, and are there any steps that could be taken to mitigate that as a factor in people's decisions to accept these positions?
Yeah. Well, you've really identified the biggest crisis I think we're dealing with as local officials is, even, I just think back on the vast majority of my career and working in Brewster is, any one of my employees with, some discipline, and working on a multi-year plan could buy a home in Brewster or one of the neighboring communities. Now, the reality is that most of our employees not only can't afford a home, they can't even find one. The competition is so aggressive. And I think that, when we, even me, since I've been here, I hired a DPW superintendent, a building commissioner, a new media operations coordinator, and the town treasurer. So when I interview, we talk about it all the time, is just how difficult the housing market is on Cape Cod. And frankly, when people apply from off Cape, I only pray that when they introduce themselves, they say, "Oh, I have a home in Harwich," right? Then I'm like, oh my God, this is so wonderful. But if they don't have a piece of property here and they live in some other, Western Massachusetts or wherever, where the housing values aren't here, I just know that this is going to be a really demanding problem. So, I dealt with it a lot in Provincetown as well. I think that, the reality is we need to do everything we possibly can to create affordable housing, not only for municipal employees, but all the other, wonderful folks out there that provide services to us. So I know that, Wellfleet's got a really bold and aggressive housing plan. It's really impressive. And you got wonderful volunteers committed to this. And thank God we have money in the Community Preservation Committee as well, and they've really been focused on housing. But, I don't know. I think that, is the town over time going to have to get, Nantucket buys housing for employees to stay in. Will we have to go there? I don't know. Some towns are providing subsidies to employees for housing. I think all of the above is it's really, and for, fire and police in particular, it's really problematic because once you get beyond the Rotary, these housing costs are just concerning.
Next, Ryan Curley, you had your hand up.
Yeah, but before I say anything, Manny Smith has been waving at the camera, so if he could go first.
Okay, Manny, unmute yourself. If you can.
You're still muted, Manny.
I'm not sure if I have to do so.
No.
Yeah,
Yes, you do.
you are
Okay.
unmuted by host. Okay, thank you, Dick. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. First of all, Charlie, I want to thank you for the tremendous amount of work that you've done for us and with your helpers from Brewster. And I have a question that I've been wondering for a long time. What other sources of revenue do you see? I see you smiling already. With your experience in Brewster and other towns, what do other towns do? What does Brewster do that we don't do that is going to move us forward on the revenue side? I see year after year after year, we've been here about 20 years, overrides and other problems that you've identified, and futures that don't look all that great, even with federal and state resources that we need to do better with. But I would really like to know what you see. And the one thing I've thought of and has been bandied about for quite a while is parking revenue, parking revenue at the harbor. You go to Provincetown, and if you want to go to a movie that's $20, you got to spend about $20 to park. You go anywhere in other towns, and all of the harbors and all of the downtowns have revenue sources for the parking. We just don't. But beyond that, and I'd like to put that bug in the ear of the select board and the finance committee. But other than that, what, from your experience, do you see as revenue sources that other towns do routinely and we're not doing?
Yeah, okay. So thank you for that question. So, I used to kind of make fun of myself and sort of say I was like a money grubbing local official. Every penny counts, right? Every dollar is valuable to maintain municipal operations. And, I think, voters, you can go to the voters for overrides periodically for operating costs, but you want to do it with a discipline and a multi-year plan. So that being said, that means you got to maximize your other revenues. And, you do have, and I'm working on one of them, and I can only do so much in the time that I have here. If I had more time, I'd work on more. But for example, I've been working with the water commissioners because your water operation is small, but it's going to be growing with this new water main expansion. And the water enterprise fund is heavily subsidized by the tax levy. Now, your operation's so small, I think you have like 285 customers right now. So you're never gonna, the water rates couldn't pay for those full costs of services. But but we did hire a water rate consultant. And I've been working with the water commissioners to take a look at our spending and our water rates compared to other places. And we are working on a new rate structure that will be presenting relatively soon. And so those are the things you got to do. I mean, so right now, every taxpayer is subsidizing water operations, and that's fine. But I think you want to maximize your revenues when you can. Same thing with the marina. I mean, you do run it as an enterprise fund, but it appears to me that we're not fully identifying the costs for running that marina. We provide health insurance to employees. We provide overhead. We do their accounts payable and their payroll. A true enterprise fund liability insurance, a true enterprise fund would identify all those costs and try to create a revenue plan to fully fund their costs. And if we can do that, it's going to reduce the burden on the tax levy, free up those monies for other general municipal operations. And I had a meeting with the department heads today. We spent a couple of hours. I went over the financial forecast and what we're dealing with. And I, same thing on other, just a small thing. I mean, building permits, if someone's putting an addition on their home, they should largely be paying the costs of that through their fee. And I don't think we've really been reviewing those revenues with the frequency that, many towns would do. So I think we need to look at all those parking. I know there might be a problem with parking down in your harbor with some of the grants that you received initially. But yeah, Provincetown makes $2 million a year in parking. So, every opportunity to look at revenues has got to be done in a deliberate manner. So, we do have a lot more money coming in on room occupancy tax. I would say to you, like, when the law changed many years ago, where you could go from, I think, 4% to 6% on room occupancy, Brewster adopted that the next year. And I know there's resistance to these things. You did increase that last June, I think. But, there's probably like 12 years of revenue that you left on the table. And I know these are difficult public policy conversations in communities, but, seasonal residents put a demand on your community relative to infrastructure and services that we have to ramp up for. So you should get revenue wherever you can. Marijuana is a new revenue source, and those monies have been expanding rapidly. So yeah, you got to be opportunistic, and you have to be deliberate looking at these every couple of years. Yeah, and there is going to be a lot of federal and state money coming through. I'm really confident you're going to see some really exciting news soon, and that's good because these are important projects, and if we can minimize the impact on property taxpayers, that's our job.
Okay, Ryan, you yielded, but is there something you want to say?
Yeah, and Sheila's waving as well.
Well, if she raises her hand, if you want to speak, use the reactions tab and raise your hand.
Okay, so housing is definitely impacting everything. I think we're all aware of it at this point, that especially on the Outer Cape in particular, that we are well into a housing crisis. And it really is impacting our ability to hire and retain staff. We've had a number of building inspectors. One of them took the job and then was unable to find a place to stay. Our assistant town administrator spent over a year before she was able to find, a house. So, I mean, it is definitely a crisis in terms of housing. Um, there are going to, in addition to the work that's already been done, there's going to be a number of, right now, there's 5 articles on town meeting, on the town meeting warrant, that have to do with housing. I hope that townspeople will support them, but we'll see. And then, if it's helpful to people, um, I don't know, I can send a copy of the financial policies. It's a rather long document, but it could be distributed by the forum if that's helpful for people. Um, and then, there is going to be some changes in how the town operates and runs things. I mean, there obviously has to be change. Um, and one of them, I mean, besides the day to day, the other one of them is, how are we funding things? Um, funding every single capital item with debt just ends up increasing the overall cost burden to the taxpayers, where you're paying both the principal and the interest for the capital item when we're doing a certain a certain base level of capital items, every year. I mean, we have capital improvement requests that are just to make a building weather tight. Um, so,
Okay.
yep. All right, well, that's all for me. You're muted, Dick.
Paulie,
Um, yeah, Chief Polly.
Chief
Oh,
Polly?
thank you, everyone. I just want to take a second to kind of maybe some of you that don't know me. I'm Rich Pauly, the fire chief here in town. And I just want to take a backtrack for a second on Charlie's comments about the operational budget deficit that we're looking at in fiscal year 23. We think that's around $580,000. And that's just to fund the operation of the town to the same services that you have, what we enjoy presently. For those that may not know, we have a fund called ambulance receipts. The ambulance receipts comes in on an annual basis, on a monthly basis. If someone goes to the hospital in the ambulance, they're billed. It's a common practice in about 90 to 95% of the communities all over the country. And largely your insurance company pays for that. What they don't pay for, we write it off, so we don't go chasing folks for money. But it comes out of insurance companies, Medicare, Medicaid. Those receipts come in at about $350,000 to $400,000 a year, consistently. But in the last 4 fiscal years, and with previous town administrators, particularly Mr. Ciccani and further previous to when Harry was here, we would sit down and look at the balanced ambulance receipts. And the deal was, or the situation was, that we would keep a balance in there to be able to buy an ambulance. But the town could, or the town administrator could recommend to the select board to take, some of that fund balance out, if you will. Well, in the last 4 fiscal years, we've taken $1.2 million out of ambulance receipts to help fund the operating budget of the town. And that number has just been really, really difficult to deal with, because now for the, last year we couldn't buy a new ambulance, and that's what ambulance receipts is for, is to buy a new ambulance, part of that. So it illustrates Charlie's point that, we're using one-time revenues, if you will, to pay for annual operating expenses. So Charlie and I have had some good discussions about this, but I just want to reiterate again that, draining down a fund by $1.2 million over 4 years is not good fiscal practice for annual operating expenses. and when we need to still maintain a capital budget. But I just want to give the folks that are here tonight some better explanation of that, and as to kind of why we're here and what part of what the issue that we're facing. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, we have one other hand, Dave Mangs. Let's see.
Dave is going to be unmuted, and Chief Polly, you're going to take your hand away if you have nothing
I'll
else to
take your
say.
hand.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say, I live in West Hartford and I've had a home in Wellfleet for 25 years. I love the town, and, I'm just so proud of the work you're doing, Charlie, to get things together. I look at, things like the Herring River project with $50 million maybe coming in for the first level of this. We've got $1 trillion infrastructure bill. I think getting the town's finances together is going to be absolutely essential in order for us to get that money. But I guess the question is, when the 50 million arrives one way or the other, is the town going to be managing that? Who's going to be the fiscal responsible party to make sure that huge influx of revenue is handled appropriately, and we get our money's worth in terms of really making a big difference for bringing the herring and alewives back to the Cape Cod Bay, which will help the entire fishery area, all the fishermen that are dependent on it, be better for the shellfish. It's a huge, where is the money coming from, and who's going to be providing the fiscal accountability? That's really, the bulk of my question there. I think are we in a position to actually apply for it? And I worry that we may miss our opportunity if we don't have our act together. Thank you, Charlie.
Oh, yeah, no, pleasure. No, so yeah, well, you're entirely right to be concerned about that. Now, the town most likely will be the fiscal agent, the monies will be managed through the town's treasury. But we've already been, the Friends of Herring River and in a larger team have done incredible work on this project. They're highly organized. One of the, we have conversations every week trying to work in different aspects of this. And one of the conversation points is that, Wellfleet doesn't have a lot of bench strength to take on that responsibility without some assistance. So, just like any construction project, you're going to hire an engineer and you're going to hire an owner project manager. We're going to have to include in those funding requests money to manage the project as well. Yeah, there's no capacity in my mind internally to do that.
Okay, I'm just gonna inject myself here. It's coming on to 8:25. And Charlie has a long day and a lot of work to do, and he's put a lot of time in. So I see that Fred and Elaine, McGee and Elaine have their hands up. And Dick, if you see any more than that, I do think that we need to use some brevity here and be succinct. And let's recognize that and let Charlie have get some sleep tonight.
Okay, Elaine.
Elaine?
Okay, good evening. Thank you so much. This has been really, really informative. Charlie, I noticed almost every other town on the Cape has a planning department, and that is something that Wellfleet does not have. And I know certainly in terms of housing, towns that have these professional services have made really significant progress. And I know someone earlier asked about reorganization or organization. I don't know if you feel that a planning department is something that would be useful for Wellfleet. I know our wonderful new ATA is a planner, but she has a million things that she has to do. So just would like your comments on that.
Yeah, Rebecca Ruffley is the assistant town administrator. She's been with the town, I think, since last April, and you're lucky to have her. So I would, if I really, I've been here for 9 months, so other people know more about the organization than I do, but the initial things that strike me is, Rebecca she assists the planning. She's the chief procurement officer. She does HR, and then many other functions throughout the day. So, it's definitely an overwhelmed position, and you've had a lot of turnover, as I understand it, in that position. So if I looked at a couple of things, whether it's some professional services to assist on housing to take the burden off, or planning slash, if I had a wish list, that would be on it. And then also, I would tell you the human resource management side of it is also something that there's a lot of work to be done to take a look at our systems and policies and procedures. And it's not something, it was mentioned in the audit, it's not something that I'm going to really touch when I'm here. But the new town administrator's got to deal with both those issues.
Okay, Fred,
Okay,
you
I-
get the
it's
last
Fred.
question, and then we'll end up. Fred?
Yeah, I think not so much a question as a comment. I'd like to just, from the Finance Committee's perspective, just to piggyback on many of the comments that have been made tonight. Because we see the departments come through and we see these large projects come through, if you take a step back and look at Wellfleet from a systemic perspective as a town, there's an analogous principle to what businesses deal with, which is kind of total cost of ownership and being able to manage business as usual. And comments have been made tonight about providing services at level funding. And last night we looked at the operating budget, and the question was, well, level funded relative to what? To last year, to your actuals last year? And the answer primarily was level funded to provide the same quality of service. No more or no less than what people expect from the town. And that varies from department to department. There are essential services, police, fire, and DPW. There are, I won't say less essential services, but more fungible services. And we've discussed, for example, the beach and traffic to the beach and revenue generating components of the town. All of those go into the mix. And then when you superimpose upon that, the difficulty of finding people and the increase in salaries or the cost of doing business, even at the beach and recreation level, because you're competing with Stop and Shop, for example, for part-time or seasonal workers, it is a dynamic situation, but it goes up every year. And one thing I think people need to take away from this, and I think this, I'd just like to kind of finish by saying, per Elaine's last comment, the way you can, or the way you have to, I think, rationalize what you're getting for your buck, the same way you would as a homeowner or anything else, where you say, periodically, I have to upgrade my home. I wasn't planning on it, but there it is. I have to put in a new boiler. That happens. We need a fire truck. We need this, we need that. That just happens. That's part of the deal. And it's a Prop 2.5 buster very often. But absent a planning function or a forward-looking function, it's hard to say with any clarity in a group like this, what does Wellfleet want to be in 5 years? What town do we envision in 10 years? What are we optimizing for with limited money? Are we optimizing for tourism? Are we optimizing for young families to move in and fill those positions so that they have a place to live? And it's hard to come up with a concrete answer. So as you go through the process of evaluating whether it's fair to have 2 more firefighters or a new police cruiser or a canopy down at the beach or whatever, it has to be laid against some basis of what do we think the town actually wants and what does it want to be when it grows up. And we're going through a transitional period, in my opinion, right now, under the able leadership, frankly, of Charlie and Lisa and Mary and, excuse me, Rebecca. And the department heads, that's part of what, from the finance committee's perspective, part of what we have to take on faith is that department heads like Chief Pauly and Chief Hurley and so on know what they're doing. And if we don't trust them, then we're completely a C. Thank you.
Okay, Sheila, did you
So
want to
Dick,
wrap up?
yeah, I just want to, I think it's going to be time to wrap this up. And first of all, I just want to say to Charlie, thank you, thank you, thank you. I've worked with Charlie. I'm the county commissioner. I was county commissioner for 8 years, starting in 2009. And that's where I got to know Charlie. And Charlie did understand how a town runs. And I remember Bill Hinchy at one of our, One Cape meetings. And, Bill Hinchy was one of these guys that was able to finesse the town of Chatham to be in a great position that when not ARPA, but the ARA during the recession, he and Duncan and with the help of the county got themselves in a great position where he was able to get basically federal funding for the entire town sewering. And for that, I wanted to give him an award. I think we should hold him up. So, and he really did, at this forum, this question and answer, he said, there's a formula for these things. You go to school for public administration and they teach you how to run a town. And it's not that complicated. So I want to leave this that I'm sure you have a public administration degree, Charlie. Yes. Where'd you get that? Where'd you get the degree? Where'd you grow up?
Waltham, Mass, right outside of Boston. I went
Yes.
to Suffolk and Northeastern. Yeah.
Of course. And those are the best. I mean, they all are work in Mass General Law. So I do recommend for our search committee to zero in on those two schools because those people are taught the mechanisms and the formula of how to have a great town. And stop going outside to other expertise. There's really people who are trained to do this. And Charlie is the best example because not only did he do a great job from probably a very young age when you graduated at the town of Browns, we're not going to say how old we are now, but and now you are superior, you're a superior type of administrator. So, and you did that by learning and working with the people and listening. So I just want to say thank you for everything you've done, not just for this town, but across the Cape. You've done a lot of work in on all aspects, even with the county.
Thank you.
I think that a lot of people will have more questions. I think that maybe even the forum will collect those questions and put those forward and things to think about. And you can use those as bullet points, hopefully as you exit soon. But I do it for your sake, not ours, because we would have you here forever, as you well know. But Charlie's an example of what we're looking for. And there are people out there, they're being trained as we speak. So put those young people, just like Charlie was when he came into Brewster, on your list.
Well,
So
Sheila,
Charlie, I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
well, you listen, thanks so much for your, Sheila and I, obviously, we're friends and we've known each
Right.
other for a long time. And that's what I love about the Cape is, there's a lot of collaboration and cooperation that goes on. And, like me reaching out to other communities for help. And that's what we all do. And all your department heads do that too, right here in Wellfleet. So, yeah, honestly, my family and friends make fun of me about being back in the workplace, but no, I'm honored to have served Wellfleet, and I've met a lot of new friends. That's kind of how I look at this whole experience. So thanks so much.
Well, thank you.
I'd
Dick,
like
if
to-
there's nothing else,
I'd like to thank everyone for attending. If you want to be on our mailing list, please go to our website, wellfleetcommunityforum.org, and there's a place where you can add yourself to the mailing list if you're not getting the notices. In April, we will be having 2 meetings, one pre-town meeting, which I hope Dan Silverman, our moderator, will help us out as he has in the past. Yes, thank you, Dan. And then we will be going over candidates night if there are contested. We hope there'll be contested elections, or if not, we'll decide. In March, are we going to have something on?
I think we're going to, I think, well, we'll have to take a look at March, but there are, I was looking at those going forward, but there are other things coming up.
Mhm.
So, and also, just to add on to what Dick is saying, we are always looking for members and of our forum, because we want to hear new ideas. What do you think that we should focus on? What are the issues in the town? This is definitely the town issue right now. But, with that, when we have questions coming before us, we're going to put the money into the Herring River. We're going to do, what is the Route 6 going to look like? All of these things get contentious, and that's where we are to help have those conversations and give some clarity, and we can all come to an understanding together, and that's the point of the forum. So I want to thank everyone being here tonight. I know everyone's concerned about our town. We love our town. It's a very beautiful little town, and we want to protect it and keep it. So so we need all of your input, and we need to work together and not be on opposite sides of things. And that's the goal of the forum. So with that, Dick, I guess we're going to say goodnight.
Right. So
And I want to thank everyone
much.
for coming here. And Charlie, again, thank you for hanging in there. And it's nice to see you, Mr. Mangs, from wherever you are. But thanks. We appreciate all our non-resident taxpayers coming here and giving us your views as well.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.